Hey everyone, Brendan Sender here. How are you? Thanks so much for joining me and welcome to a special review for the debut studio album from former Motley Crue guitarist Mick Mars, The Other Side of Mars. First release of music outside the band of Motley Crue, just released on February 23rd of 2024. I'll break down the album here, do a full review and unboxing of it. But before we get into it, if you're new to my channel and haven't already hit the subscribe button, please do. Also, leave a comment, hit like. All those things do help support my channel. I'd greatly appreciate it. And of course, as an added bonus, if you turn on notifications, you're going to stay up to date on all that's going on in the world of music, just like this, with a special review for the brand new Mick Mars solo album, The Other Side of Mars. So I want to give you guys a little bit of history here, a little bit of background on Mars. If you're big Motley Crue fans like me, you already know it, but sit tight as this stuff will tie into what I'm going to talk about later on within the actual review of the album. So obviously, Mick Mars, best known as the lead guitarist for one of the world's biggest bands, Motley Crue, playing aggressive yet melodic bluesy guitar work for the band. I really think he's one of the most underrated guitar players out there in terms of that, what he's done with Motley Crue. But before he became famous in Motley Crue, Mick Mars was known as Bob Deal, born Robert Deal, and he played in several different bands before that, releasing a few singles even before joining up with Motley Crue in 1981. Having put out an ad in a newspaper, this is a pretty famous line here that's always told within these stories, but loud, rude, aggressive guitar player in need of band, for which Nikki Sixx and Tommy Lee responded to. And of course, as they say, the rest is history. But I think that key thing that Mick was even referring to himself back then as an aggressive guitar player, despite the bluesy rock sound that he is, certainly will tie into later what we're going to be talking about on this album. And of course, Motley Crue released their debut Too Fast for Love in 1981, and then would release a brand new album about every 2 years, culminating with their biggest album, Dr. Feelgood, in 1989, which has gone on to sell over 6 million copies. The band itself is actually estimated to have sold over 100 million albums worldwide. But of course, by 1992, we all know the story with grunge having come in 1991. Not only was there a big change in the music industry, but also within the band itself. They changed singers, they changed their sound. And this, of course, wouldn't be the last time that they do this, but the first time they really changed who they were. And that's the 1994 self-titled album, arguably their heaviest and hardest album in their catalog. Personally for me at the time, Big Hit, still love that album a lot, even though it's very, very different sounding from everything else with Motley Crue. Unfortunately, though, the success didn't continue with that album, so they brought Vince Neil back into the fold, recorded Generation Swine in 1997, but again, changing their sound with a more contemporary sound, and then introducing beats and samples and a lot less guitar on that album than any previous ones. And big surprise, it again didn't restore the success to the band. So the band would return to its trademark sound on the next 2 albums, eventually deciding though to retire, call it quits in 2015, much of which we all thought was going to be it for the band. However, it didn't take long. They reunited in 2018 to record 4 new songs for their biopic movie, The Dirt, which was a huge success, ultimately leading to the band deciding to blow up their famous contract that said they would never tour again and go out in 2022 for a reunion tour, having all those new fans from the movies and everything. And I understand that. I totally get it. But ultimately, when the band itself decided to continue on beyond just that big stadium tour that they did, Mick Mars announced his retirement in October of 2022, with John Five replacing him in the band Motley Crue. Now, Mick had been working on a long gestating solo album, having first announced it back in 2014, so a decade on. We are finally getting his debut solo album, The Other Side of Mars, here in 2024. So the album itself is produced by Mick Mars, along with Michael Wagner, who's worked with Dokken, Skid Row, mixed and engineered the first Motley Crue album. And this one here is mixed by Chris Collier, who does the remixes for the White Snake box sets and their recent greatest hits packages, red, white, and blues. The lineup on this album is Mick Mars on guitar, Paul Taylor on guitar and keyboards, Paul Taylor coming from Winger, Ray Luzier on drums from Korn, Chris Collier plays bass on the album. Then we've got vocals, Jacob Bunton, who plays with Steven Adler's band and recorded one album under the name simply Adler. And then we have a second vocalist on this album, Brian Gamboa, who sings on two songs, track number 4, Killing Breed, and track number 8, Undone. So with all that in mind, we've got, a producer who's known for having worked with these 80s artists. We've got a guy mixing and engineering the album itself who's worked with White Snake, all stuff that puts us in line for an album that we would think would sound like that. We've got people backing up Mick Mars like Paul Taylor coming from Winger, another band from that era. Of the songs, the 10 songs are written by Mick Mars, Paul Taylor, Jacob Bunton. So it's not outside writers, things like that. 9 with vocals, 1 instrumental on here, clocking in at 39 minutes, not overly long album. So again, all in all, these things setting up from what I heard early on with this album, thinking this could be a really good thing just based on who was involved in it. Now, if we go back, because I said this album has been gestating for 10 years, in 2016, Mick released a couple samples or previews of 2 songs that featured John Corabi, who was the vocalist who took over in 1994 on the self-titled album from Vince Neil. Those 2 songs, Gimme Blood and Shake the Cage, are not on here. And those 2 songs were amazing. They sounded like they were ripped right off of the 1994 Motley Crue album. And again, with that, knowing what that was, who's involved here, you're being led down this path. But before I jump into this, I do want to preference that this album here is a good album for what it is. That being said, it is a modern metal album. It is not what I was led to believe, so to speak, until we actually heard singles from this album. And again, that's when it began to become clear that Mick was definitely going in a different direction for this. And to be fair, Mick Mars has stated from the get-go, it's also why the album is titled The Other Side of Mars. He wanted to explore sounds outside of Motley Crue, but this album doesn't have anything in line with Motley Crue's sound to it. Even the heavier stuff from the 1994 album, the album is even heavier and more modern sounding than that. So you've got to kind of take all of that in and accept that before really getting in it. But, when your fan base is expecting a bluesy hard rock album from one of the best guitarists that's out there, at least of that genre, that era, and instead of getting a guitar-driven album, because there's very few solos on this, and it's overly modern production on here, it really provides little clues as to the fact that Mick Mars is even involved in it. But as I said, he co-writes every song on here. He produces the album. Of course, he plays on the album. So this isn't just something that somebody wrote for him that he came in and did. He's fully involved in this thing here. It's just something different that he wanted to do. So I think, if you can accept that this is not a Motley Crue sounding album in almost any way, shape, or form, there is still a lot to love about this album. It did take me a number of listens to get into it, to sort of strip away the baggage that I brought with me, expecting for it to sound like a Motley Crue album, or at least in some shape, way, or form to sound like Mick Mars. You can probably get into it then and at least enjoy the strengths of what this album is. So let's talk about some of the standout tracks that are on here. Track number 1, Loyal to the Lives, the first single off the album, probably one of the best ones that are on here. At the time of hearing it, I was very disappointed with the track. But again, if we strip away the fact that I was expecting to hear a Motley Crue for what it is, it's a very catchy song. I like the chorus that's on it. I don't particularly care that Jacob Bunton's vocals start with a filter that's on it. I sort of feel like first song out of the gate, we really should have just heard him singing very strong on it. But all in all, very good song. Track number 3, Alone. This is the first of 2 ballads that's on the album, but it is part of also what makes the flow of the album a little disjointed. It also doesn't help that we've got a couple of different vocalists that are on this album. But it does sort of strip away that more modern production, and it helps to sort of show, again, another side of Mars on it. So I do like it for that. But as I said, you go from some very heavy stuff to a couple ballads that are on this album that are almost night and day, creating a little bit of a disjunctive feel. Track number 6, my favorite song on here, Right Side of Wrong. It was the second single. When I heard that one following Loyal to the Lie, I felt like, okay, I could actually get into this album. I do really dig this one here. This one here, I think if more of the album had sounded like this one particular track, I would have a different review that I'm doing on it. It's a good cross between the Motley Crue 1994 self-titled sound and the more modern sounds presently going on that they're blending in with this album here. But I just don't always feel that that blend happens seamlessly, whereas there's a number of times on the album that those more modern sounds just completely take over, and that's really all you're getting. Track number 9, Ain't Going Back. This one here is maybe the most Motley Crue structured song on here. If you remove the modern sound effects and the filtered vocals and things like that, I actually think the structure of the song would fit perfectly on a Motley Crue album. You can definitely hear more of that vibe with it in terms of his guitar playing. And as I said, it's the structure of it more than the sound of it. And track number 10, L.A. Noir. This one here is the lone instrumental track on the album. This is actually what I would have expected a lot more of the album to be like, where we're really about the only song on here that we get to hear Mick Mars being himself playing guitar, albeit in a bit more of a bluesy state than typical. But there's times where he talked about making a blues album and stuff. So I don't know if this is a holdover track from those thoughts, or that type of an album that he was working on, or just, something that he did here. But again, having an instrumental bluesy track, having some very balladesque style songs, and then some of the most heavy guitar playing we've ever heard Mick Mars done. There's a lot of different styles, a lot of different flow to the album, all in all. All right, let's take a look at this album. There's the cover of it here. We got Mick Mars faded in the background. We've got his fist there with the letters Mars spelling out his last name. And of course, the title there, The Other Side of Mars. I like this back photo where he's laughing. He seems very relaxed here. Just a very different vibe than you usually get from Mick Mars. So this is a digipack. We open it up, we get some cool graphics there, 1313, which is on his knuckles. This is another tattoo of his. And there he is just chilling out with an acoustic guitar, although really no acoustic sounds on this album. We pop out the disc itself, we see the 1313, so we get that with the Mars knuckles when you put them, side by side. There's a booklet in here, kind of interesting because they put this little cutout, but it's very hard to get it out here. Although it actually opens here and it's so much easier to pull from there. So, all right, that's the front side of it. We got the guitar strap with that artwork that's on it there. And when we open it up, we get lyrics on the inside. Doesn't specifically call out who wrote the songs, although on the back side we get some information who talks about who plays in the band, that all the songs are, published by the 3, Mars, Taylor, Bunton, and so forth. But that's the artwork, that's the packaging. My biggest complaint on this, though, is, as we saw on the back side, no track listing, right? So I have to open up the album, and on top of that, no track listing on that. I actually have to open this up and follow along with the song titles in here. I really hate when bands do that. I don't know why they ever leave track listings off the back sides of these things, but that's what happened here. So bottom line on this album, it is a good album if you can let go of the baggage of expecting some semblance of sound to make this a Motley Crue album, which it is completely not at all. For me, it was a big pill to swallow to get past that. As I mentioned, it feels disjointed at times. flow from the heavy songs to the slow songs. There being two different vocalists that are on here. But as I mentioned before, this album has been growing on me. I've given it a number of listens and I am warming up to it overall. But I'll be honest, I probably wouldn't have given it as much time as I'm giving it had it not had the name of Mick Mars on it. I'm a huge Motley Crue fan. I really wanted to give this a shot. I wanted to give it a chance. So, if you're into Motley Crue and you like modern music, then this is an album you definitely want to check out. If you're not into that, be prepared for a huge shock. Definitely enter with caution on this album. I'm going to keep listening to it. It has grown on me. I do like it. I don't think it's going to end up in my top 20 albums for the year, but we've got a long way to go. Who knows? I may be singing its praises come that time of year. All right, everyone. Hopefully you enjoyed this review of the brand new Mick Mars debut solo album, The Other Side of Mars. I'm sure you guys have opinions of your own on this album. Let me know your thoughts, what you think of the new modern sound that is Mick Mars here, or whether or not he really should have been doing something else. All right, everyone. Take care. Have a good one, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.